Now, I know this phone has been out for a little while, but I still wanted to talk about it. The thing is, I needed to find, let's say, the mindset to get into it. Because I've been a fan of the ASUS Zenfone line for a long time now, and I've seen it go through a lot of different iterations. From the flippy dippy phones over to the small compact powerhouses, and now to a more conventional device that is about as big as the specs that are underneath the surface. But it's still in the name, Zen, and it's something that I strive to find in my own life. So much so that during a trip to Tokyo, I decided my partner and I would leave the city for a while and try to find a little bit of our own Zen. And I thought that would be a great time to actually take the Zenfone 11 Ultra out with me to see if I would actually enjoy it. Because there's a lot different with this phone now. And as you can see in my hand, I'm definitely struggling with it a little bit, because this is definitely the phone that I want to love. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? Here's what worked and what didn't with the ASUS Zenfone 11 Ultra. You'll be seeing a lot of photos and videos coming from the Zenfone 11 Ultra in this video, so let me know what you think about all of them in the comments down below. I will have some thoughts on the cameras in a little bit, but let's start off with the elephant in the room, the phone itself. The mere existence of this phone in a smartphone landscape where this kind of thing is very common begs the question, who exactly needed another Ultra device? There is kind of a precedent for this in the Zenfone line. Back when the flippy dippy cameras, which I still love and I wish they would bring back when those were a thing in the Zenfone line, the larger phone was the one with the flippy dippy as ASUS started to change their course and start making compact powerhouses. Now we're kind of seeing the opposite of that with the Zenfone 11 Ultra. The Ultra now is considered sort of the main phone, while the compact powerhouses we've had for a few generations now are starting to be considered something a little bit on the side. Even at the time of me making this video, we still don't have a regular 11, just an Ultra, and we have no word yet on if we're going to get anything different. What we're seeing here is basically everything that we expected from the Zenfone 10, only with a bigger screen and some updated specs. The thing is, with a bigger phone, we also get those big phone problems. The 6.78-inch AMOLED display is a great viewing experience, don't get me wrong, but I've never felt more precarious when handling a Zenfone before. One of the main reasons for this is that the screen is actually quite wide, so it's really hard to reach to the other side. There are little features in the software, like this reachability thing here, in order to reach the top a little bit easier because it just brings it down in the interface, but still, reaching to the other side is just not that easy. Also, this phone is just super smooth all over the place. I dig the look and I dig the design language that ASUS is trying to put into their smartphones and their various devices recently, but hand gymnastics are just all too common with this, and it's definitely a two-hander of a phone most of the time. But part of the reason why we're calling it Ultra is because of that big screen, and a big screen does mean big fun. This large AMOLED screen is a joy for viewing all kinds of media and playing games, and it can handle all those games with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 inside. The result is actually a phone that I reach for most when I want to play all kinds of games. After all, this phone is heavily influenced by the ROG phone. So much so, in fact, that the USB port here on the bottom is over to the side rather than dead center on the bottom. That means that when you connect this to something like a Backbone 1 controller, the phone is raised up a little bit, and it makes the phone feel more like a console that has been completed by attaching that controller. I still mainly play Marvel Snap, but this phone in a controller makes me want to get back into things like Honkai Star Rail or my emulators. And one thing I've always loved is how the ROG phone influences make this an even better phone. Things like dual band Wi-Fi for even faster connections, which you don't see that very often. There are Game Genie software layers for extra support during play sessions, and really the ASUS Zenfone 11 Ultra is just the ROG Phone 8 Pro, just without the extra bells and whistles and the design cues. Now I know this video is me trying to come at this phone from the lens of Zen, but Ultra is also in the name, and I have to admit, because of that, I know that I can throw pretty much anything at this phone, and I'm gonna have quite a bit of fun. Now with this size of phone, there's obviously going to be room for all of the specs that sometimes you don't see in other devices. There is of course the headphone jack, and now that I use a pair of IEMs for enjoying music and for editing my videos, well, it's really appreciated. I can plug those into this phone. And speaking of sound, the dual speakers give some proper body to the audio, rounding out the media experience, but definitely coming in handy for gaming in the controller if I'm not going to connect any of those headphones. A larger body also means a larger battery. In here is a 5500 milliamp hour unit, and it has meant that battery life on the ASUS Zenfone 11 Ultra really hasn't been that bad. It can also be charged up at 65 watts wired and 15 watts wireless. Now, to be fair, a lot of this hardware was available in the smaller ASUS Zenfone, so going ultra in a way doesn't mean too much, but I know that battery is really important for a lot of you, so 5500 milliamp hours, I'll take it. On the topic of charging, there is one feature here that comes from the ROG lineup as well, and that is pass-through charging. Essentially, you're just powering the device rather than powering it and charging it at the same time, which often leads to higher temperatures, especially if you're playing intensive games for long periods of time. It's one of those thoughtful features that does appeal to a certain type of user, in this case like gamers or people who watch movies on the larger screen like this for long periods of time. And of course that 15-watt wireless charging is appreciated as well, and I happen to have a really nice charger to pair with this, courtesy of the sponsor of this video, Torras. A big thanks to Torras for sponsoring this video and for quite literally saving me on a few key days during this trip. That is because of their literally really cool coolify neck-worn air conditioner. And Torras is actually the inventor of the neck air conditioner, which is way more than just a fan that you wear. The weather in Japan is pretty unpredictable, and on a few days it got super hot as I was walking around baking in the sun. While hydration is always paramount, feeling comfortable comes next, and a key place to address that is at and above the neck. The coolify wearable air conditioner uses what they call the Coolology system, including 3 aluminum cooling plates and 366 cooling particles to deliver a fresh feeling to the head, neck, and even back. And as you can hear right now, cool air gets blasted in multiple directions for comfort, but the neckband itself also feels really cold, which is super refreshing. But remember, this is an air conditioner, so all of this can also help in the opposite direction, as the same system can be used to heat you up in colder climates. Obviously, that's not what I needed at the time. The Coolify Cyber is ergonomically designed to fit all kinds of neck sizes, and it can be worn for a long time comfortably, just like I was walking around the Ghibli Park under the hot sun. And by using the display screen, it's easy to dial in all of the settings for a personalized temperature setting. And while the Coolify Cyber has a large, long-lasting battery, it can get topped up with another one of Torras's products, the O-Stand Power Bank. This MagSafe compatible charger also includes a USB-C charging port that you can connect right to the Coolify Cyber to power it back up. The Coolify Cyber can also be used while it's plugged in, so these two pair together quite nicely. It's also super slim, making it an ideal travel companion for other devices like smartphones with and without MagSafe compatibility. Together, these two have been great tools to run around with, especially the Coolify Cyber. It's a great tool to have as summer is on its way. To try all that Torras has to offer, including the Coolify Cyber neck air conditioner and the O-Stand Power Bank, check out the links I have in the description and in the pinned comment below. It's getting hot out there, so this could be a great way of feeling better under the heat. And thanks again to Torras for sponsoring this video. Alright, I know you've been expecting this next part from me, and that is, as a content creator, the cameras are always important to me, and the Zenfones haven't really been meeting that level lately. I mean, in a phone that is this much bigger than before, I would kind of want them to go ultra on the cameras as well, even if it means the camera bump is a lot larger, but the hardware inside is even better. But that's just not the case with the Zenfone 11 Ultra. Let me know what you think of the photos and videos you've been seeing so far from the phone during my visit to Hakone, but the fact remains that for the most part, the hardware and the shooting experience on here is very similar to what we got in the Zenfone 10 last year, only now we get a telephoto lens, and even that is not truly adding to the experience in very key ways. You can see behind me in Owakudani, all of the plumes of the sulfuric, let's say ash, smoke, and you do smell it in the air. They did try to warn us though that it was going to be like really strong, but I don't really feel that way. I can actually handle it pretty well. But as far as the smartphone is concerned, the Zenfone 11 Ultra is already showing me how there are definitely some compromises in what the Zenfone has been trying to do. There is a zoom lens on here, but if you record in 4K video, you cannot use that 3x zoom for that video. You can only use it in 1080p. On the topic of 4K also, that front-facing camera, despite being able to do some pretty good portraits, also not able to do 4K. Can't have it all, but we are trying to just see how much how much of the essentials we can have with this phone. And maybe those are not truly essentials. You can let me know in the comments. There's a spot here to take some pictures, kind of like you're on the ropeway and whatnot, but I gotta give it up to them for having this phone stand here that is perfectly placed to take a vertical shot. Now, the main sensor is a 50 megapixel shooter that proves the best for basically all purposes, especially with that gimbal stabilization built in, which we'll get to in a second. But really, it's the fact that the main sensor is solid but not exceptional that gives me the same slight disappointment that I had in last year's Zenfone 10. It doesn't help that the other sensors are just okay. They're decent, they're solid, I'll say, but they don't really elevate the overall experience beyond that. And even in the main sensors, there are some quirks. This is a camera that you want to pop out of your pocket and take some pictures with immediately. But I have found, especially with the main sensors, that exposure comes in a bit too hot. Often, tapping on the subject immediately brings down the exposure, and then all of a sudden, the photo looks great. That level of inconsistency can be a little bit annoying, especially if you're using this as your main daily shooter. I've said it for basically any other smartphone that falls into similar trappings, where the hardware of the cameras doesn't really change year after year. There's so many cool things happening in smartphone camera tech these days, from 1-inch sensors to stacked sensors, that I wish we would see them in more places, especially in certain phones where the rest of the experience makes it something I really want to make my main. Because it's not to say that ASUS isn't trying. On the contrary, they have one of the better implementations of stabilization on a smartphone camera. Gimbals in a smartphone camera aren't new, they're not uncommon, but ASUS seems to just make sure they have it every single year, and they put it in the right sensor so that you can get that stabilized footage or those better photos in low light situations. And in putting it in practice, it does make the user, me, have that aha moment from time to time, which is important to have in a camera experience. That gimbal is pretty much always at work, even in the Pro mode, where I like having all of these robust settings here, even though I do keep it simple by just lowering the EV slider accordingly. Like I said, the gimbal does help in lower light situations when slower shutter speeds are required to get that shot. But it's the smooth video that is something I just really enjoyed getting. Imagine if this gimbal system that ASUS has been using for quite some time now was put into a better sensor. I know that there are other phones that do that kind of thing, but I definitely want it to happen on an ASUS phone in the future. Because for every reason that I think I wouldn't like this phone, there's a reason why I find myself wanting to just figure it out. The cameras aren't ideal, but when it hits and it hits smoothly, I enjoy it. The size of the phone might be big, but I am getting used to it, and honestly, the big screen with all of this power underneath it is legitimately gorgeous. And the suite of hardware and battery is simply one of the most robust that you will find in smartphones today. What really drives it home for me though is this software experience, the Zen UI. I have to give ASUS a lot of credit because the great power that is in this phone is actually pretty unassuming. You know you can get some real work and play done on here, but for the core daily Android experience, Zen UI just makes things really breezy. That comes down to the fact that ASUS is really not all that overbearing when it comes to their extra apps, their bloatware, if you will. And yet there are features which are simply practical and helpful. And I've already alluded to these features: the dual band Wi-Fi, the reachability for a better screen experience even though it's not perfect. And clearly those features don't clutter an otherwise very Spartan and minimalistic experience, making the Zen UI one of my favorite versions of Android that is out there because it's basically Android. It's not trying way too hard. So really, it can be as zen an experience as you want it to be, without sacrificing any of the potential workflows that a power user might want to create and have. So again, we beg the question, at what point does the Zenfone hit what we'll call a critical mass, or at least a tipping point? Some of my peers have been pointing at this phone as the death of the small phone, but I want to have a little bit of faith. This is called the Zenfone 11 Ultra after all, and I would really want to see what a Zenfone 11, full stop, would actually look like. Because it feels like the Zenfone 11 Ultra shows that ASUS is trying to have it all right now. The same Zen-like experience that the smaller phones did a great job of driving home. And then the Ultra mindset that made a ton of sense in the all-in nature of the ROG phones. I still want a smaller Zenfone 11 or a smaller Zenfone in general that has pretty much the same experience that I have come to enjoy on here despite the quibbles of the larger phone overall, but it's just good to have some of that choice. A bit like the choices I delved into during my journey with this phone, from the hustle and bustle of Tokyo to the zen simplicity and nature of Hakone. And I think in hoping I would find a middle ground in the Zenfone 11 Ultra, I was hoping that I would ultimately fall in love with it. I think I got pretty close in all honesty. I mean, I am still using this as my daily phone. But I do hope that ASUS is not done exploring, let's call it total zen, and that they take a break or a retreat from the Ultra life for a change pretty soon. And so, there you have it, the ASUS Zenfone 11 Ultra. I still wanted to talk about this phone at some point because I have some great memories with the Zenfone lineup, and I wanted to see how this one would actually fare, especially during my trip here in Japan. I think ultimately it is a net positive because they're still providing one of the best general experience in smartphones, especially with the suite of hardware and software features that you don't really get in other flagship smartphones. But by going big, they might be alienating some of their fans that really enjoyed these smaller phones of yesteryear and before. But I want to know if you are one of those people in the comment sections down below. A shout out to Torras once again for sponsoring this video. Their neck air conditioner definitely saved me on a couple of really hot days here in Japan, and also their MagSafe wireless portable charger has been very helpful for keeping that and my other devices charged up. Check them out in the links in the description and in the pinned comment below. But from there, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you so much for kicking it with me again today. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and enjoy your tea, everybody.